Hello and thank you for joining us again. You're watching our mid-morning edition Arirang News on this Tuesday, April 7th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Min. Before we dive right in, these are the stories topping the hour. Over 1.3 million people worldwide infected by the coronavirus, while the U.S. sees its death toll surpass 10,000 mark. Across the Atlantic, a stunning new development. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is moved to an ICU as his COVID-19 symptoms worsen. The IMF says the COVID-19 pandemic has already hit the U.S. economy with unprecedented speed and severity. The Asian Development Bank also says the outbreak will drain 5% of the world's GDP. Beating expectations against the odds, Samsung Electronics performs well despite the pandemic smashing economies around the world. The first major tech firm to report earnings post-outbreak, Samsung's Q1 profits rise 2.7% on year. The coronavirus situation has so far infected over 1.3 million people worldwide, with the global death toll going well over 74,000. One of the countries most affected, the U.S., where it sees the death toll continuing to surge, reaching over 10,500, according to the latest figures we have. Now, this just coming 37 days since the U.S. reported its first coronavirus deaths. The Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services said on Monday that for New York, New Jersey, and Detroit, this week is going to be the peak week for infections and deaths. As for Europe, the death toll has surpassed 52,000, with Italy having the largest death toll of 16,000, followed by Spain and France. But some European countries are moving toward alleviating restrictions, such as lockdowns and the closure of businesses deemed non-essential. Austria is allowing shops to reopen starting next Tuesday, while Spain is aiming to slowly lift the movement ban by April 25th. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been moved to intensive care unit as his coronavirus symptoms have taken a sharp turn for the worse. According to a statement issued by Downing Street late Monday local time, the Prime Minister, who was under the care of doctors at St. Thomas Hospital in London for around a day, was moved to the intensive care unit at the advice of his medical team. As for that, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has been asked to deputize for him where needed.
So in light of those circumstances, the Prime Minister asked me as First Secretary to deputise for him where necessary in driving forward the government's plans to defeat coronavirus. And the focus of the government will continue to be on making sure at the Prime Minister's direction, all the plans for making sure that we can defeat coronavirus and pull the country through this challenge will be taken forward.
In Downing Street, officials say the 55-year-old Johnson remains conscious and has been moved to the intensive care unit as a precaution in case he requires a ventilator. Buckingham Palace also says the Queen is being kept informed about the Prime Minister's condition. With Japan seeing a recent surge in coronavirus cases, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is set to declare a state of emergency as early as this Tuesday. And that unprecedented move could remain in place for up to 1 month. Our Kim Jae-hee tells us more.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is preparing to announce a state of emergency. The emergency declaration, to be issued as early as Tuesday, will cover 7 prefectures, including Tokyo and Osaka.
Since there are already critical situations happening at medical facilities, we are advised that we, the government, should prepare for the declaration of a state of emergency.
If Abe makes the call, it will be the first time such a declaration has been issued in Japan. Abe said the unprecedented move could remain in place for about a month. It comes as concerns rise that Japan's public health system could collapse under a wave of coronavirus infections in key metropolitan areas. Tokyo is experiencing a lack of hospital beds due to the recent increase in the number of infected patients. The declaration would help the government contain the virus by allowing local authorities to construct temporary medical facilities by appropriating private land or private buildings. It would also allow local governments to limit outdoor activities by urging the cancellation of events or restricting use of certain facilities to prevent the spread of the virus. but the Japanese government stressed there will be no lockdown like those seen in other countries. More than 4,500 people have tested positive for the COVID-19 in Japan, and over 1,000 of them are in Tokyo. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Here in the nation, more overseas-based South Korean nationals are being brought back home as the coronavirus pandemic continues to sweep the world. In the next coming hours, some 260 South Koreans in New Zealand will arrive at Incheon International Airport via a special chartered flight. New Zealand is still under one of the strongest lockdowns in the world, but the South Korean government has worked with officials there to arrange special flights to bring them home. South Koreans that had been in Hungary will also be arriving this morning thanks to cooperation between their respective governments and SK Innovation. The firm previously sent workers there as part of the ongoing construction of an EV battery plant there. And South Koreans in Moscow and Istanbul, as well as Kenya and Kyrgyzstan, will be also arriving home this week. Officials from the Foreign Ministry says so far over 6,600 South Koreans from 43 countries have returned home with the help of the government amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And virus is also taking a toll on the economy. The International Monetary Fund says the consequences of the coronavirus pandemic for the American economy have already been hit with unprecedented speed and severity. And the Asian Development Bank also echoing the IMF's grim prospect and predicts the pandemic could cost an eye-watering 5% of global GDP. Our Lee Seung-jae with the details.
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a wrecking ball to the world economy, especially the United States, which has seen over 350,000 confirmed cases and over 10,000 deaths as of Monday. According to a blog published by top IMF economists on Monday, the U.S. economy is experiencing the consequences with unprecedented speed and severity, adding that nearly 10 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits in the last 2 weeks of March. The economist added that the number is a sharper increase than even during the peak of the 2008 global financial crisis. The IMF also cited limited but encouraging signs of recovery in China, but said it could not rule out a resurgence of the pandemic in the country. Daily satellite data on nitrogen dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, a proxy for industrial and transport activity, shows that there's a gradual decline in containment measures and a resumption of economic activity. Meanwhile, according to the Asian Development Bank last Friday, the cost of the pandemic could be as high as $4.1 trillion, or nearly 5% of global GDP, depending on the virus's spread through the US, Europe, and other major economies. It added a shorter containment period could limit the damage to $2 trillion. The new estimate takes into account the immediate impact on tourism, consumption, and investment. In early March, the ADB predicted the virus outbreak could cost the world economy $347 billion. But latest figures come as the epicenter of the virus shifted from China to Europe and the US, with the number of global infections surpassing 1.3 million. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's Samsung Electronics, LG Electronics, and Hyundai Motor have all extended their temporary shutdown of their plants in Russia due to the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak. Those three South Korean conglomerates had previously suspended operations at their Russian plants, but were due to reopen this week. And Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics plants were originally scheduled to resume operations on Monday, which was just yesterday. But LG has extended the suspension period until the end of April. And Samsung has yet to finalize its reopening date, while Hyundai Motor also said it will announce its reopening plan in time. And now to some positive development. Samsung Electronics said Tuesday its operating profit for the first 3 months of this year likely went up 2.7% from a year ago, slightly beating expectations. Becoming one of the first major tech firms to report earnings amid the COVID-19 pandemic, the company said it expects $5.2 billion in operating profit for Q1 this year, up from the $5 billion it posted the same period last year. The company's earnings guidance report also said it expects the first quarter consolidated sales to be around $45 billion, up almost 5% on year. Analysts say the company's semiconductor business might have helped the firm stay in the black amid the pandemic as data centers fueled a recovery in memory chip markets, one of the major profit-making businesses for Samsung Electronics. The head of the WHO has made a special suggestion and asked South Korean President Moon Jae-in to speak at its assembly next month on South Korea's highly acclaimed response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He said that it would serve as a great opportunity to share Korea's experience in tackling the virus. And to that, the president said he would work out the details through diplomatic channels. Our Oh Jung-hee with the details.
A special proposal from the World Health Organization. Speaking over the phone Monday, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom asked President Moon Jae-in to be the keynote speaker for the upcoming World Health Assembly in May. The WHO chief praised Seoul's COVID-19 response and stressed that it's important for Moon to share South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and encourage a comprehensive approach in dealing with the outbreak. President Moon thanked the WHO for its offer and said his country has three basic principles: openness, transparency, and democracy, and added that he hopes to provide other countries with know-how and quarantine items. There have been continued requests from the International Committee for South Korea to share its COVID-19 knowledge. President Moon has spoken with roughly 20 national leaders across the globe, including the president of Peru, Martin Vizcarra, earlier on Monday. President Vizcarra said that he hopes Peru can follow South Korea's lead by conducting a large number of tests rapidly and that Peru needs South Korea's test kits. President Moon promised that South Korea will proactively share its knowledge on coronavirus treatment and quarantine, as well as medical data with Peru. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
A lot of people, especially here in South Korea, wear a face mask as a protective measure against the ongoing pandemic. But it's common for many of us to touch the surface of the mask without even noticing. And a new study says that's something many should avoid if possible, as the virus can live on the mask surface for a surprisingly long time. Our Kim Sung-min reports.
How long does COVID-19 survive on the surface of objects that we casually use and touch throughout the day? The University of Hong Kong recently observed how long COVID-19 survives on various objects under room temperature and made some shocking discoveries. On newspaper and toilet paper, it took around 3 hours for COVID-19 to die. On wood and on fabrics, it survived for 2 days. On banknotes and glass, the virus was shown to survive for an astonishing 4 days. But most surprisingly, for surgical faces mask we often wear to protect ourselves from infection, COVID-19 was still alive on the surface more than a week later. The research team said there are 2 lessons we should learn from the study. First, the virus is sensitive to disinfection in general, meaning that disinfectants and bleach can effectively be used to kill the virus. That's why COVID-19 could not survive for long on the surface of toilet paper soaked in bleach. And they say the most important lesson is to never touch the outside surface of face masks during and after wearing them. Experts are also highlighting the importance of washing your hands after touching masks and other objects that could be carrying the virus. Hand sanitizers are also useful as they are easy to carry around. The US CDC also released a study showing similar results in the scientific magazine Nature, adding the most effective way to protect yourself from COVID-19 is to wash your hands frequently and thoroughly. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Good morning. The dry and sunny spell continues this Tuesday, and afternoon highs will be 2 to 4 degrees higher than yesterday, hovering in the upper teens or low 20s in many parts of the country. So let's take a closer look at today's daily highs. Seoul and Jeju will get up as high as 18 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju will be quite warm at 22 degrees under plenty of sunshine. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's dealing with dry eyes and cracked hands, not only because we have to wash our hands lots these days, there are dry conditions across much of the country with more regions now under dry weather warnings here in Korea. And as we can see, it's going to stay sunny and dry for the rest of the week. And many will likely remain indoors for some time. So here are some tips to quickly boost humidity levels in your house. These tips should help to add some moisture in the air. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the globe.
And that does it for us at the Sarah on Arirang News. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.